Chapter 1056, Celestial Troops and Generals. Suddenly, the Wei Wu army started to kill the Black Feather army from behind. No one knew where they had appeared from. They abandoned their horses and rushed towards the Black Feather army. They did not even know where their horses had gone. In reality, horses were typically used as tools to replace walking for the Wei Wu army. Rank 2 experts in the Wei Wu army were faster than horses. Horses were just used to allow them to save energy. Although riding horses saved their energy, horses restricted their speed when they fought. A rank 2's speed was terrifying when they were at their peak. Thus, the Wei Wu army did not need horses while fighting. A cavalry troop made up of over 5,000 boorish soldiers in magical armor was scarier than a cavalry troop made up of plain horsemen. This was true for rank 2s like Li Haitan, but Lu Shu realized that rank 1 experts like Lu Yizhao fought this way as well, as they felt that this was more exciting. Furthermore, the Wei Wu army was able to suddenly appear behind the Black Feather army as they depended on Lu Xiaoyu. When an Earth-type metahuman reached rank 5, they were able to bring people underground. When Lu Shu randomly thought about this, he asked Lu Xiaoyu how many people a rank 1 like Anthony could transport underground. Her answer was 7,000 people. This number of people would cause a market to feel crowded. Furthermore, a peak rank 1 Earth-type metahuman was able to transport them along long distances. Of course, if the journey was too long, Lu Xiaoyu would have to use her celestial powers to make up for the lack of Anthony's strength. But short distances of less than 20 kilometers would not be a problem. In the past, Lu Shu had thought about it. As a rank 1 Earth-type metahuman, if Anthony were to fly into the air and fight others, they would be at a disadvantage. Even Earth-type metahumans who were strong in the past would grow weak when they reached rank 1. After all, even if you raise the ground to the sky, the enemy could change the location of the fight, right? You would have to spend a lot of energy changing the landscape. It would not be impossible to fight, but they would be at a disadvantage. But now, Lu Shu suddenly realized that there was no difference between the strongest or the weakest in this world. It completely depended on how you used it. For example, Anthony's ability to transport people underground was a beneficial weapon to launch a surprise attack in battle. When the Black Feather army was fighting at the city, the scouts had created a massive barrier on the outskirts to prevent attacks from behind. But now, the Wei Wu army had appeared out of nowhere. It was impossible to defend themselves. Then, the Wei Wu army each held their new tridents and attacked in all directions. The formations at the back of the Black Feather army started to collapse. Their overall strength was only rank 5. Their elites were only rank 3s, while the commanders were rank 2s. Their leader was a rank 1. How were you supposed to defeat the Wei Wu army if there were 5,000 soldiers who were on par with that of commanders? At this moment, 3 rank 1s from the Black Feather army tried to stop the Wei Wu army, but just as they flew over the Wei Wu army, the soldiers of the Black Feather army watched in despair as dozens of rank 1s from the Wei Wu army flew into the air. Zhang Weiyu and the rest had been hiding in the Wei Wu army formation. Some of them had been in the vanguard to lead the way. They pretended to be rank 2s who destroyed the enemy formations. Their enemies could not defeat them no matter what. The rest had been waiting for their enemies to fly over. Would you be afraid of over 60 rank 1s? Last night, Lu Shu brought Lu Xiaoyu underground back to the secluded place in King Lu Mountain. Only Zhang Weiyu and the rest knew about this. Furthermore, Lu Shu and Lu Xiaoyu had gone there to allow Lu Xiaoyu to advance to rank 1 safely. Zhang Weiyu and the rest were puzzled. Why did they have to go so far away? That night, when they were chatting with the traveling businessman in Nanging City, they discovered that Twinkle Twinkle Little Star was not the peak sound of Tao that they had heard several times. It was clearly something that their great lord had come up with. Thus, they thought that Lu Shu had brought Lu Xiaoyu to King Lu Mountain to advance as he was worried that an even more appalling sound of Tao would be produced, but they could not understand. If Lu Shu's sound of Tao was that amazing, then so be it. Was Lu Xiaoyu's sound of Tao so amazing as well? Why was Lu Shu worried? That night, when they returned, Li Haitan realized that Lu Xiaoyu's expression was very frightening. Due to the catchy tune of Twinkle Twinkle Little Star, some people in the Wei Wu army started to hum the song. Typically, when Lu Xiaoyu heard this, she was cheerful. But last night, Lu Xiaoyu established an order that the singing of Twinkle Twinkle Little Star was banned. Now, Lu Xiaoyu had advanced to rank 1 as well. Her skills after she had advanced to rank 1 became a mystery. Lu Shu treated this as the most classified secret he would not tell anyone about. Now, the Wei Wu army had started to kill the Black Feather army. They were like ferocious tigers that had entered a herd of sheep. No one could stop them. The aristocrat armies in the city were overjoyed. It felt as if celestial troops and generals had come. They had been saved. When the 3 rank 1 patrons from the Black Feather army saw over 10 rank 1s from the Wei Wu army fly into the sky, they were in despair. The Wei Wu army had 4 rank 1s in the past, right? Even if someone had just advanced, they only had 5 rank 1s. How did they suddenly have so many rank 1s? Suddenly, they saw Lu Shu laughing at them from among the Wei Wu army. When they thought about the legends surrounding the head of the Wei Wu army, the 3 rank 1 patrons turned and ran. Occasionally, there were roars from the sky. Zhang Weiyu, Dong Yi, and the rest flew in the sky like shooting stars. They did not give the 3 rank 1s the chance to escape. The Wei Wu army was like a scalding knife that had come into contact with wax. They pierced into the core of the Black Feather army without any obstacles in their way. If they were simply ordinary enemies, then so be it. The Black Feather army was not an army with weak willpower. But when they realized that they could not win, they would grow more and more pessimistic. Thus, the aristocrat armies saw the Black Feather army slowly disperse. No one was in the mood to continue attacking. Even if they protected their city, so what? Would they be able to stop the Wei Wu army? Definitely not. Li Haitan charged forward. He felt that it was very satisfying to be fighting with their great lord. It felt as if they would not lose. The red current surged forward. They went from the back of the Black Feather army to the city. It was as if the Black Feather army, who had been one whole, had been cut open with a knife. They started to disperse towards the sides. They had killed their way through. This was the current situation. While the aristocrat armies were celebrating, Li Haitan had started to lead people to climb over the city walls. The aristocrat armies suddenly realized that these celestial troops were too used to killing. They were about to kill their own people. The aristocrats panicked. "Dear friend, we are your allies." Li Haitan was clearly dumbfounded. "Proof? My great lord said that he left something with his allies." Yes. We just remembered about it. Your great lord left something with us. We will send people to pass it to you. From Wu Yan's distress, plus 666. From Zhu Yingtai's distress, plus 666. From Chapter 1057, Find the Wei Wu army within 3 days. How were the aristocrats supposed to help the Wei Wu army find what they had left here? They were fighting on the battlefield, but suddenly told them that they had forgotten something here. If it were not for the fact that they wanted to survive, the aristocrats would have rejected them. After replying to them, the aristocrats wiped the sweat off their heads. They felt as if they had just brushed past the Grim Reaper, but they had another problem. What had Lu Shu left with them? What should they give them? Li Haitan raised his trident. Let me tell you, if you have no way of proving that you are an ally, we will not hold back. Wu Yan was truly speechless one. He pushed the trident on his head away, turned, and shouted, "Bring my notes here. Hurry up." When he turned around, he realized that the trident was back. Li Haitan did not look kind. Whose notes? Hurry up and bring the notes that the great lord left here. Li Haitan finally calmed down. That was right. This way, it was not considered stealing. It would not be good if the news that the Wei Wu army had stolen money from their allies spread, although Li Haitan felt that it would be more threatening if such news did spread. Li Haitan looked as a soldier brought a box of notes. Don't worry. We will only take what is ours. We will not take more than necessary. The aristocrats heaved a sigh of relief. It would be fine as long as they were not particularly greedy. There was no harm working together with the Wei Wu army. They would feel bad having to take away all of these notes. Wu Yan looked at Li Haitan and said, "Which boxes have you left behind here?" Li Haitan thought about it and said, "The Great Lord said that he had left behind 2 of those boxes." From Wu Yan's distress, plus 748. From Zhu Yingtai's expression darkened. He turned and ordered people to bring another box filled with notes over. Li Haitan was now satisfied. The Great Lord asked me to tell you, don't worry. We have the Wei Wu army in front. The Black Feather army has no time to trouble you. The Lord of Heaven has allowed you to take 10 cities. You can find and sell magical armor to us. Magical armor? Zhu Yingtai was dumbfounded. He had heard that the Wei Wu army collected magical armor in the palace and spent a lot of money on them. He asked curiously, "Why don't you just ask us for the armor?" Wu Yan gasped in shock. He wanted to cover Zhu Yingtai's mouth, but he was too late. Li Haitan was evidently dumbfounded. That's right. Why don't I just ask you for the magical armor? I suddenly remembered that my Great Lord left some magical armor here as well. To be honest, Li Haitan did not feel any guilt in playing with these aristocrats. They were the aristocrat armies who had been sent here by Wen Zaifu to trick the Wei Wu army. Furthermore, if the Wei Wu army had not come, the aristocrat armies would all be dead. The Wei Wu army waited for Li Haitan below. The aristocrats suddenly felt a sense of desolation. It was not their state of mind. After all, they also knew that the Wei Wu army had saved them. They were in a state of desolation as all the magical armor had been taken away by Li Haitan. The typical soldiers in aristocrat armies did not have magical armor. Only the aristocrats and some core soldiers could use them. It was usually used to conceal their identity. But now, what use was there concealing themselves? The Black Feather army was running away, while the Wei Wu army was chatting below while they waited for Li Haitan. The aristocrats felt that they had never seen such a strange battlefield in their entire lives. It was as if the situation would become strange wherever the Wei Wu army went. Wu Yan and Zhu Yingtai looked down at the Wei Wu army, who was happily chatting with Lu Shu. Lu Shu felt their gaze and looked over. Everyone on the city wall suddenly sensed a pressure that they had not felt before. Then, the Wei Wu army continued to kill the Black Feather army. They did not plan on letting the defeated Black Feather army off so easily. Is there a need to be so ferocious? Zhu Yingtai was slightly doubtful. There seems to be no need to do so. I feel like they are killing them with all their might. Under typical circumstances, for example, when the Black Feather army was completely defeated, there would not be a need for the winning army to kill all of them. On one hand, since they had won, they still had to preserve their energy. On the other hand, there was no rush to do so. But the Wei Wu army was different. The Wei Wu army was killing with all their might. They were of the stance that they would not let the Black Feather army off. The aristocrats on the wall all gasped in shock. The Wei Wu army was far too ferocious. They did not know what Lu Shu was thinking. To Lu Shu, if they let off the Black Feather army this time, they would have more Black Feather army soldiers to face on Earth. Thus, to the aristocrats, the Wei Wu army seemed unusually brutal, even merciless. There were times when Lu Shu would think about whether the soldiers of the Black Feather army had families. But since they had stepped on the battlefield, they had no choice. After the Wei Wu army had achieved victory, they continued their journey to the west. The stakeholders who had been observing the Wei Wu army could not understand what the Wei Wu army was doing at first. After all, they had just returned from the palace. Under the circumstance that Duanmu Huangqi could not fight on the battlefield, no one would be able to kill them in Nanging City. After all, it would be embarrassing for a master to kill a lowly commander. Duanmu Huangqi did not go to find Lu Shu, but the Wei Wu army went to cause trouble for the Black Feather army. Furthermore, it was likely that Duanmu Huangqi was there as well. Now, the various stakeholders suddenly realized that the Wei Wu army was taking revenge against Duanmu Huangqi. Did they have such a bad temper? This was a long-lasting hatred. They had rushed back to Nanging City and gone out to take revenge after just one day of rest. After they were done killing the Black Feather army, they involved their allies as well. They were very efficient. At that moment, the entire universe knew that Lu Shu bore grudges. Some people even felt that Lu Shu would become an example of bearing grudges in the universe. If you wanted to say that someone bore a grudge, you could describe them as being very Lu Shu. The Black Feather army in the west must have received the news. Thus, many scouts walked in the mountains, looking for traces of the Wei Wu army. The Black Feather army, as a strong power, did not fear the Wei Wu army. Instead, they wanted to actively seek out the Wei Wu army and eliminate them. But it seemed as if the Wei Wu army had disappeared overnight. No one could find them. The Wei Wu army, who had entered the battlefield in a forceful way, suddenly had a change of heart. They were lying in ambush and waiting for the best opportunity, as Lu Shu was preparing for the master of the West region to suddenly participate in the battle. The Wei Wu army would not be able to kill several thousand people in one go. The scouts from the Black Feather army looked for traces of the Wei Wu army everywhere. Last night, when the defeated Black Feather army troops returned, their leader killed over 1,000 soldiers as a warning to the rest. This was the punishment for losing. The bodies of these soldiers were hung at the entrance of the military camp. The scouts of the Black Feather army had no choice but to put in their all. If they could not find the Wei Wu army in 3 days, they would die. Chapter 1058, You're Here? A group of Black Feather army troops were running through the forest in the night. Some of them walked on the uneven mountain roads and checked everywhere. They did not slow down because of the uneven roads. They had a special characteristic. It was as if they would be able to sense movements in the forest despite the darkness. They seemed to have been trained to see things in the dark. The scouts carried a bow and black feathered arrows. The 5 scouts maintained an equal distance from their teammates and advanced. This was their second day carrying out this mission. They only had 1 day left. The scene of the defeated Black Feather army troops being killed was still fresh in their minds. If they could not find the Wei Wu army, they would face the same fate. The Black Feather army was a heaven for the ambitious, as everyone could find their own aspirations in the army. The Black Feather army would give you plenty of advantages and opportunities as long as you were strong enough. But it was merciless as well. The price for committing a mistake could be death. These 5 scouts were the most elite out of all the scouts. They had just arrived with the rest of the army 7 days ago. At that moment, half of the armies in the West region were already gathered here. Everyone knew that something major had occurred. The scouts had also heard about the space pathway from the rest of the soldiers. Although it was passed down in the form of legends, everyone was very sure that it was real. One soldier from the Black Feather army had disappeared. No one could determine what was beyond the space pathway. The other side was very strong, but was probably not as strong as the West region. They definitely had a master as well, since one master from the West region had disappeared. In the past, there were 3 masters in the West region, including Duanmu Huangqi. Later on, one of Duanmu Huangqi's slaves also advanced to the master realm, bringing the total number of masters to 4. But now, there were only 3 left. But there were no feelings of sadness in the Black Feather army. It was as if the Black Feather army soldier who had disappeared and the master had nothing to do with them. Even the 5 scouts probably had no feelings towards one another. They were not thinking about whether others would die. Instead, they thought about whether they would die if they could not complete this mission. At this moment, they saw a flame in the distance. The flame was very weak, but the scouts stopped in their tracks and looked at one another helplessly. It was definitely not someone from the Black Feather Army carrying a torch. With the strict rules in the Black Feather Army, no one would carry a torch in the wild. They were excited. If it was the Wei Wu army they were looking for, then they had succeeded. Not only would they not die, they would be rewarded handsomely as well. This was the reason why the Black Feather Army attracted those who were ambitious. As long as you had achievements, you would have everything. Why do I feel like there are a lot of mice? One of the scouts lowered his voice. He saw at least 100 mice. Furthermore, there was a tuft of black fur on their heads. They looked very strange. But there were many strange things in the universe. Creatures had experienced many changes throughout the process of evolution. Thus, it was normal not to have seen such creatures before. "They are just mice," said someone in a small voice. "Let's be a bit more careful." The 5 scouts rapidly traveled in the direction of the flame. The darkness in the forest was their greatest protection. But they had only ran a few hundred meters before suddenly stopped in their tracks. They realized that there was someone in front of them. The person was wearing the typical Wei Wu army magical armor. They might have encountered their scout. This was very normal. It was impossible not to have any scouts or spies around while a large army was traveling. They would not be able to sleep well without them. They felt that something was wrong, but could not figure out what. Thus, the leader of the scouts turned around and looked at the other 4 scouts. Then, they slowly inched forward. If they were not desperate, they would not have attacked, as the sound of bows and arrows in the darkness was very loud. But as they slowly approached the Wei Wu army scout resting on the tree, they suddenly realized that the scout was slowly opening his eyes. The scout looked at them and smiled. "You're here." Their muscles instantly tensed. They had never seen such an arrogant gaze in their lives. Not only was he not nervous when he saw the 5 scouts, he was very. Then, they saw him fly into the sky. The scouts from the Black Feather Army blankly looked at the scout in the sky. What in the world? They did not know that the Wei Wu army had a rank 1 scout, as all those who knew this were dead. They were now in a state of shock. They did not know what to do. A rank 1 expert as a scout? Were you a demon? Half an hour later, the 5 scouts lowered their heads and slowly followed Lui Zhao to the flame. When they walked out of the forest, they suddenly realized that over 5,000 soldiers from the Wei Wu army were sitting around several bonfires. They were wearing their magical armor. They looked down at their notebooks and were writing something in them. When the scouts from the Black Feather Army arrived, everyone looked very excited. Something had happened. This meant that they no longer needed to do their homework. Lui Zhao brought them to a bonfire. "Great Lord, I've brought them back." The 5 scouts from the Black Feather Army watched as a good-looking young man held his bowl and ate. When the young man saw them, he put down his bowl and gestured for them to sit down. The 5 scouts carefully sat by the bonfire. They guessed that this young man was the head of the Wei Wu army, who had been making waves recently. But why was he called Great Lord? This title was rather strange. Lu Shu looked at the 5 scouts. Lu Xiaoyu, who was beside him, was frustrated over the accounts. She was calculating how much food the Wei Wu army had eaten today. "I will ask and you will answer." Lu Shu smiled. "How about it?" The scouts did not try to fight back, as they knew how the Wei Wu army killed others. They definitely did not mind killing these scouts. "Please ask," said the leader of the scouts in a polite tone. "Why is the Black Feather Army so desperate to find us? It is as if all you scouts have gone crazy. Are your lives at stake?" Lu Shu asked curiously. The scouts lowered their heads. They said in a low tone, "We have received orders that if we do not find you within 3 days, we will die." Lu Shu was dumbfounded. He paused for 2 seconds and said, "Won't you die even more quickly if you find us?" That makes sense. From Lin Yu's distress, plus 999. It was not a matter of dying more quickly. If they found the Wei Wu army, they would be able to live for another day. Chapter 1059, Great Lord Xiaoyu. This time, Lu Shu had decided that he would not let any Blackfeather army soldier he saw off the hook. Thus, he would not even allow the scouts to live. Recently, major changes had occurred among the scouts in the Wei Wu army. In the past, Lu Yizhao brought a large group of people out. Now that they had little fury, there was no need to do so. When the army of mice was in Luo City, they had provided clear information to Lu Shu. After a long time, Little Fury's education had allowed it to fulfill unthinkable functions. Not only could Little Fury read and write, its core mice were able to do so as well. Back then, when Lu Shu provided Little Fury with the refresher fruits, Little Fury did not embezzle the fruits at all, as he desired for a group of underlings. He was the great lord of the mice in the Beimang remains. When he came to Earth, he had fallen in rank. He was only number 3 in his family. Although Little Fury saw Lu Shu and Lu Xiaoyu as family and did not mind its 3rd position, it also longed for the glory of the past. Thus, Li Haitan and the rest could not become scouts. They had missed the opportunity to give up on homework by becoming scouts. That night, when Li Haitan saw Little Fury beside Lu Shu, he almost cried while peeking. Back then, when Little Fury first came, he had thought that this senior disciple was their saving grace. Now, he felt that the soldiers of the Wei Wu army had been tricked by this senior disciple. When Lu Shu checked Li Haitan's work, there was a line of words on his homework. Senior disciple has harmed me. But Lu Yizhao was different. First of all, Lu Yizhao was more civilized and did not need to do homework. Furthermore, being a scout was Lu Yizhao's greatest joy. Lu Shu was willing to do anything to help him. Thus, Lu Yizhao was the only permanent scout in the Wei Wu army. The mice were temporary staff. Needless to say, Lu Shu rejoiced the fact that he had allowed Little Fury to nurture the army of mice. The army of mice was very handy. They were not easily discovered. Even if they were discovered, they would be ignored. Furthermore, they were large in numbers. All the scouts from the Blackfeather army who entered within a 50-kilometer radius would die. The mice army would have eliminated them. If Lu Shu had not wanted to ask the scouts some things, they would have died the moment they encountered the army of mice. At that moment, the leader of the Blackfeather army sat in the military tent with a dark expression on his face. He wore the same clothes as the patrons in the palace, adorned with patterns of flowers and pythons. He looked at the rest of the people in the tent. "Have you found the Wei Wu army?" Not only were the scouts panicking, he was panicking as well. Li Liang was dead. The new leader of the Blackfeather army had to be alert, as Duanmu Huangqi had gone mad. His subordinate said in a low voice, "Master, not only have we not found the Wei Wu army, the number of scouts who have returned back to the camp has been decreasing as well." "Did they all run away?" the leader of the Blackfeather army asked in a ferocious voice. "I don't think so," said the subordinate. "The Blackfeather army is famous for our methods to chase down soldiers who have escaped. Not many people have dared to run away." The leader calmly looked at his subordinate. "Then what do you think is the reason?" "I feel that they might have found the Wei Wu army." All the scouts who had found the Wei Wu army had died. All those who had not found the Wei Wu army had been found by the Wei Wu army instead. When a large army passed by, not even the plants would survive. All those who had seen the Wei Wu army did not survive. Furthermore, the Wei Wu army worked very quickly. The people they had sent out the day before had not returned. When they discovered the possible position of the Wei Wu army and went to attack, the Wei Wu army was gone. Slowly, everyone realized that the Wei Wu army was not hiding from the Black Feather army. Instead, they were efficiently depleting the Black Feather army's life force. They knew that no matter how strong the Wei Wu army was, they would still be in danger when they faced 200,000 Black Feather army soldiers. They were still humans. Even if they were practitioners, they would be fatigued as well. Thus, while the space pathway had not opened, the Wei Wu army chose the most energy-saving method. They decided to engage in guerrilla warfare in the mountains. To the Wei Wu army, this was very familiar. They had done the same when they were on King Lu Mountain. It was just that they did not have caverns this time. Lu Shu felt that this was a huge pity. If they had caverns, the Wei Wu army would be able to eliminate the Black Feather army at a faster rate. During this period of time, the Black Feather army lost about 2,000 people every day. The leader of the Black Feather army felt that something was not right. Why did it feel as if the Wei Wu army clearly knew their deployment and formation? They were able to effectively attack their deployed forces and lie in ambush before they came. In reality, they did not know that Lu Shu and the rest had even eliminated the process of obtaining information. After Lu Xiaoyu advanced to the 5th level of Nebula, the 4th level of Nebula allowed her to capture a 4th spirit. She was definitely not willing to let go of her 3 existing spirits. After all, the bishop was responsible for controlling the battlefield, Anthony was responsible for mass killings, and Johnson was responsible for helping Lu Shu create swords. They were indispensable. Thus, the 4th black hole had appeared at a good timing, as every time she captured a spirit, she would be able to obtain their memory fragments. Scouts served the army. Their actions represented the willpower of the army. Furthermore, they would be able to obtain a first-hand account of the Black Feather army. It was much better than obtaining oral information. Thus, Lu Xiaoyu would be able to observe the trends of the Black Feather army through their memories and attack accurately. They would not be ambushed either. After that, the Wei Wu army would not just kill scouts. They would be able to kill commanders. The memory fragments of the commanders were much more detailed. Recently, Li Haitan and the rest had suddenly realized something. When Lu Shu ordered them to kill, he had started to request for their armor to be left behind in one piece. Even the dumbest person would be able to guess what Lu Shu was thinking. They were going to blend in with the Black Feather army. Lu Xiaoyu was very familiar with Lu Shu's actions. The most dangerous place was the safest place. If they did not want to be chased and killed by the Black Feather army, they would have to blend in with the Black Feather army. What Lu Shu feared most was not the Black Feather army. It was the master from the West region. It was far too easy for the Wei Wu army to preserve the armor in its complete state. A group of rank 2 experts was able to fight with ease, as they were more than qualified for the task. Thus, very quickly, they had obtained over 5,000 sets of Black Feather army armor. Lu Shu stood in the forest and looked at the Black Feather army military camp in the distance. He said in an energetic tone, "Tomorrow, we will infiltrate their ranks. The best soldiers use strategy. Haitan, you have to use your head when you fight. Have you learned this?" Great Lord Xiaoyu said that your plan will not work, said Li Haitan frankly. Lu Shu started to panic. Where is she? Call her here. My plan is flawless. Great Lord Xiaoyu said that your plans have never worked, said Li Haitan honestly. From Lu Shu's distress, plus 888. Chapter 1060, Hide your inadequacy by keeping quiet. Lu Shu looked at the Wei Wu army behind him. They had changed into their Black Feather army armor. All of them stood in formation, except for Li Haitan, who was still doing his homework. Just now, Li Haitan had used Lu Xiaoyu's name to disapprove of Lu Shu's plans. Then, as a reward for his honesty, Lu Shu presented him a small hall for cultural classes. Li Haitan asked why Lu Shu had done so. Lu Shu said that knowledge could change one's fate. He was taking Li Haitan into consideration. Li Haitan felt that there was nothing wrong with the first part of the Great Lord's words. Knowledge had indeed changed their fate as carefree people. This time, Lu Shu had obtained information from Lu Xiaoyu. This afternoon, 1,000 Black Feather Army soldiers would pass by the mountains. They would head in the northwest direction and patrol the mountain range there. There would be a rank 2 commander leading the troop. To the Weiwu army, it was extremely easy for the Weiwu army to eliminate them. The Black Feather Army had realized that it was not realistic for them to rely on the scouts to find the Weiwu army. They had to deploy people to go on patrols. If not, the number of scouts would decrease. Their scouts might be eliminated even before they found the Weiwu army. A team of 1,000 soldiers was not much to the Black Feather Army. Other troops were still present in the vicinity. This was to prevent an ambush by the Weiwu army. If the Weiwu army appeared, the Black Feather Army would be able to rapidly work together and buy for time. Lu Shu decided to be on the safe side this time. First, they would eliminate one of their troops. If they were discovered, they would run away. If they were not discovered, they would pretend to be part of this troop and return to the Black Feather Army. Slowly, they would replace 5,000 of their soldiers with soldiers from the Black Feather Army. It was better to be safe. After all, Lu Xiaoyu could only obtain memory fragments. Thus, Lu Shu had to deal with the gaps in these memories with caution. On the other hand, Lu Shu realized that Lu Xiaoyu's ability complemented that of his. For example, back on Sardinia, he was frustrated about the fact that he would not be able to obtain aid from the Heavenly Network. He would not be able to go with the flow, like he did in the Collection of Gods. If you impersonated as someone else, you at least had to know who they were, right? But with Lu Xiaoyu's ability, they would be able to obtain large amounts of information from their memory fragments. This information was what Lu Shu wanted. Lu Shu led the entire Weiwu army and secretly set off. Although only 1,000 people were to blend in with the Black Feather Army this time, they still needed the entire army to eliminate them. They hid in the forest in the mountains. When the Black Feather Army arrived as planned, Lu Shu started to think about how they would be able to eliminate them without a trace. But before he could think through it, the dirt underneath the feet of the Black Feather Army started to surge like a wave. In the blink of an eye, the Black Feather Army soldiers were buried underground even before they could react. They screamed for help at the top of their voices, but their voices had been buried underground along with them. Li Haitan was shocked. Great Lord Xiaoyu is amazing. Are you sure that you are only a rank 1? Lu Shu looked at Li Haitan. I can do that too. Lu Xiaoyu rose from the ground in front of Lu Shu. The commander's name is Tang Mingyang. He is dedicated to patrolling. He lives in Hexing Lane in the West Capital. He has 14 concubines at home and loves to gamble. He is a rank 2 and uses a long sword. Furthermore, after reading out all this information, Lu Xiaoyu passed a long sword to Lu Shu. This is his long sword. Lu Shu could not help but sigh with emotion. There were times when Lu Xiaoyu finished tasks very cleanly. Lu Shu said with confidence. I will show you how I will perfectly carry out this plan. I will make you surprised. The weapons that Li Haitan and the rest held had been prepared in advance. Lu Shu led 1,000 soldiers, who were already disguised, to follow the Black Feather Army's original route and carry out the patrol. He assumed the role of the Black Feather Army commander. He had put on his mask. Lu Shu had thought about this for a long time. There should not be any problems. In the afternoon, Lu Shu even brought his troop to converge with another Black Feather Army troop. Lu Shu resisted the urge to eliminate them. He even praised himself for being able to resist doing so. Their commander did not discover anything strange about Lu Shu. Just like that, the two troops passed by each other. No one realized that Lu Shu was not the original Tang Mingyang. Lu Shu turned back and looked at Li Haitan. His gaze conveyed a message. What did you say this morning? Li Haitan remained silent. He felt that he should conceal his wisdom. If the Great Lord discovered his potential, his knowledge might actually change his fate. After being punished in the morning, Li Haitan cried and complained to Great Lord Xiaoyu. She had said something that remained in Li Haitan's head till this day. In life, you often have to hide your inadequacy by keeping quiet. Li Haitan could not understand. How? For example, you might know some things, but under certain circumstances, you must say that you don't know. Lu Xiaoyu felt that she had been too complex and Li Haitan did not understand what she had said. Thus, she simplified what she had said. When Lu Shu saw Li Haitan keeping quiet, he could not quite understand. He casually walked beside him and asked, "Do you know how amazing your great lord is now?" Li Haitan thought about it and said, "I don't know." Is your head that rigid? From Lu Shu's distress, plus 666. Lu Shu did not bother to explain this to Li Haitan. Time would prove everything. In the evening, Lu Shu brought the Wei Wu army back to the Black Feather Army military camp. Everything today had been perfect. Lu Shu hoped that there would be a perfect ending as well. When night fell, Lu Shu brought his troop back to the entrance of the military camp. He realized that the leader in charge of the 5,000 people was standing at the entrance. Lu Shu walked up to him and saluted. Tang Mingyang has returned to deliver a report. The leader observed Lu Shu. Lu Shu observed his expression as well. He had not realized anything wrong with Lu Shu. Yes. His identity had not been exposed. Lu Xiaoyu, what else did you have to say? What was that poem? Those who are cold, thank you for looking down on me, forcing me to lift my head and lead a more exciting life. Suddenly, the commander asked, have you found the Wei Wu army? Lu Shu reported. No. And you still have the face to return? All you do is take your salary, but you can't even do your job? It looks like I don't need a commander like you. The commander laughed coldly. Kill yourself. Lu Shu was dumbfounded. Li Haitan, who was behind him, almost laughed out loud. Lu Shu suddenly looked at the stars in the distance. He was melancholic. Was he being targeted by someone? Why? Would he ever be able to carry out his plans? Did the Black Feather Army even treat their people as humans? Kill them, said Lu Shu with a sigh.
What does it mean to be happy? 'Cause it looks like we all don't know. Glass half full or empty, then we just put them on a show. Try to look to the heavens to tell us things that we beg to know. Like what did the song mean?